organisation that deals in event data and performance, we often hear, yeah, we measure the overall performance of our event, we get the net promoter score. Well, that's wonderful, but ultimately, that is just a score. Understanding what's driving that score, how it differs between your key segments, how it compares to your other shows and your competitors, that's proper macro data insight that you can use to inform the strategic direction of your event. At the heart of this is benchmarking. It applies to survey data and also any other quantitative metrics collected by your business, where there's a broad data pool that enables comparison and contextualization. This could include, but is certainly not limited to, registration to attendance conversion, or indeed any aspects of the marketing funnel, event dwell time, engagement with online platforms, rebook rates, attended demographics. An example of that would be the percentage you have purchasing authority. So, what does benchmarking look like in practice? Well, let's go back to the NPS example. You've just run your trade show, conducted the post-show survey, and after the survey is closed, the results show that you have an NPS of plus 10. Cue fanfare in the building at the positive NPS. But what if the score last year was plus 20? And over the last 5 years, there's been a downwards trend from plus 30 through to the present plus 10. Well, this is the first level of benchmarking against the event itself. And again, it applies to all qualitative metrics that year on year are being collected in a consistent manner. Put differently, what can the survey and other quantitative metrics tell you about the trajectory of the event? Is it improving, declining, flatlining, or a bit like a roller coaster? So rather than just look at this year's scores, understand the long-term trends and whether this year's scores are good, bad, or indifferent compared to what you've seen in previous years helps you to inform the direction of travel. Although it's very important to understand an individual event's trends, this doesn't give any wider context. A given show may have an NPS of 10 and be in an upward trend, but how does this compare to others in that show's portfolio and across the organisation more widely? Well, this is where company benchmarking comes into play. The NPS of 10, the conversion rate of 90% from registration to attendance, how do they compare to the average performance for an event in your organisation, which we can alternatively term as the company benchmark? Is that event a leading light in your organisation, or is it trailing behind the pack? If it's the former, what can other events learn from the successes of this one? If the latter, what can the event learn from the better performing shows? A company level dashboard is key here to ensure that all key metrics from all the company's events can be seen in one place. A few tips here. Well, for larger organisers, this could be further split by portfolio so that both portfolio and company benchmarks are shown. Also crucial is access to and visibility of the dashboard. As our working groups to discuss performance, the reasons behind the scores, and to agree strategies. When benchmarking across company or portfolio, an important consideration here is that you are comparing like with like. The benchmark shouldn't be, for example, a mix of trade shows, consumer shows, and conferences. If your organisation does run all these types of events, there should be separate benchmarks for each. Audiences also need to be treated separately. Different scores, for example, for attendees, exhibitors, any other audiences or segments that you have. Which brings us to the final benchmarks covered here, industry and sector benchmarks. Everything so far has been inward looking, which is fine, but it doesn't provide you with an external perspective. So understanding how your show compares to others in the industry, and more specifically in your sector, can be particularly illuminating. As an example, if you're a trade show, how do you compare against all other trade shows? And equivalently for consumer shows, corporate events, conferences, and so on. You can also look on a global basis, so how does your trade show compare to all others run across the globe? You can then narrow it down to a regional basis, so how does it compare versus all other US or EMEA trade shows as an example? You can look on a sector basis, so let's say you run a trade show in the healthcare sector. How is your show performing against all other trade shows in that sector? Through these industry and sector benchmarks, you will be able to address how your events really stand up against the competition And once you know that, you can set some targets that are required to ensure a better standing potentially against those competitive events. And you can also look for any reasons for any inherent differences in event performance. But I hear you ask, where can I get these industry and sector benchmarks? True, it can be difficult to get this information. For this, you'll likely have to rely on your survey provider, and choosing one that is dedicated to events is important. The platform isn't set up to establish these benchmarks, either because it doesn't prioritize collecting the right information or because it doesn't track it at an industry level, is going to ultimately force you to do that legwork yourself. And that is not an easy task. For reference, Explori's industry benchmarks are based on thousands of post-show surveys across multiple sectors, all conducted over the last 10 years. Again, these can and should be shown in a dashboard format so you can easily identify strengths and weaknesses and ensure that this information is made available to all key stakeholders in your organization.